So, fun fact, ladies and gentlemen. Today's obviously Thursday. We're doing our map. Tomorrow is Friday. You have a vocab quiz on any word at 1 through 10. Friday you have a lecture 1 through 10. Monday primary, any word 1 through 20. Tuesday lecture, any of the words. Wednesday you have a test 30 minutes. I'm just telling you we're going to hold it 30 minutes for a couple weeks. And then we'll go down. So that'll let you kind of catch your breath for a couple weeks going for 30, and then we're going to cut a little bit off. Okay? But when we get to 30 and when we slow down, we don't go every single week. We cut a time off. So we kind of go from there. So keep that in mind. This week will be 30 and we'll stay here for probably 2 or 3 weeks. Okay? So if people are really turning in tests fast, then we're going to keep cutting. Does that make sense? I'll give you at least 2 weeks at this time. If we keep having people waiting to the very end to turn, then we'll hold it a little bit longer. Do we see that's not just blindly moving forward? So that takes us to next Wednesday. Next Thursday, the 3rd, I am lecturing on Thursday, and on Friday, the 4th, you are going to be completing a map on your own. I am taking a mental health day. Yes, I am taking a day because, damn it, I'm over it. So take a mental health day with me on the 4th. I am going to lunch at Ukulele with my husband, and I'm so excited. I have already budgeted time for 2 naps. So I'm pretty stoked about it. So on the 3rd, we will be doing a lecture. On the 4th, you will be doing a map by yourself. And that's what's happening next week. So let's do it. All right, we have Free Ireland. We have Great Britain. Portugal. Spain. France. Germany. Norway. Don't you know where most of these countries are by now? Sweden. Finland. We don't know. Guys, how many times have we done these damn maps? Poland. Soviet Union. Write it down here because we're going to have boxes over there, please. Black Sea. We'll fill in some water here. Caspian Sea. Med Sea. Atlantic. Ocean. All right. So we'll fill in Lower Europe, Italy. SWIZ for Switzerland. We have Austria, Hungary. This is Czechoslovakia. Then we have Romania, Bulgaria. This is Yugoslavia. This is Albania. Greece, Turkey. Okay, down here you have Algeria, parentheses France. Why? Because it's their colony. And this is Tunisia. And that's good enough. All right, so our 4 boxes. 2, 3, 4. First one is Allied and Allied controlled. Nations. Axis and Axis controlled. Nations. Next is farthest extent of Axis military occupation. November 1942. And then you have neutral nations. All right, so first we're going to do our allied. For me, it's going to be light green. You can do whatever color you want. Great Britain. Algeria. Now, please be careful. Do not color in Morocco. Monaco's not there. Monaco is over by France. Morocco, please, down here. I'm coloring in Algeria. And I don't know what the other one is. Okay. Now we're going to head over to the Middle East. Do not color in Turkey. But pretty much all these other countries are going to be green. Now look over here. Do not start coloring blindly. Because Saudi Arabia, which is created after, is going to be neutral. Now why are all these countries over here allies? Because of what system? Mandate system. So they're all going to be pro-allied powers. Now, please look. I'm going to draw a nice little line through what will become the Soviet Union because some of it does get conquered. All of this on the other side of the Soviet Union is going to be allied because the Soviet Union is allied. Why is he? You were very proud of this, knowing this fact before.
Hitler invaded Russia.
There you go. Hitler is going to break his non-aggression pact and invade Soviet Union. If you ever become a leader of a country, the last thing you should do is invade Russia because you're going to lose. No one has ever been able to do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the only places that are controlled by the Allies. Who do you think should have won this war? The Axis powers. They have way more going on and are way more successful. For me, the Axis powers are going to be red. Makes sense. Don't forget to color in your box like me. Okay. So, these are countries that have given way directly to Hitler and have sworn allegiance directly to Hitler. Hitler has reached out and they're like, yeah, Hitler, you can totally control our country and tell us exactly what to do. And Hitler's like, great. So, Germany, Italy are under Hitler's direct control and all of our islands. Austria, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, all of these countries are going to sign allegiance with Hitler and allow him to come in and take over. That is the difference. Also Finland. Finland is. So, when we talk about Axis-controlled nations, these nations are literally, and Albania is given, are giving Hitler the power and authority to make all the decisions for their country. One more. Down here, sorry. He is going to take over Egypt and will be Libya. Libya are going to work with Hitler because he pretty much threatens to blow them off the maps. So these countries are going to directly work with Hitler. Now keep in mind these are very big deals because he will now control the Suez Canal, which he will control worldwide trade. Okay. Orange is going to be the furthest extent to which Hitler will control. This is the land he is going to conquer. So all the red we just colored are territories that he got out of negotiations. Like, hey, I can conquer you, or you can just do what I say. And they're like, no, we'll just do what you say. So, this is the territory that Hitler is going to hard fight for. As you can see, he's going to get pretty far into Soviet Union. Now, keep in mind, the western part of Russia is the most dense and the wealthiest of cities. He's also obviously going to invade Poland because his invasion of Poland on June 22nd, 1939 is going to be the official start of World War II. That is when England and France decide to declare war. He's also going to conquer Yugoslavia as well as Greece. He's going to take over Tunisia, which he needed because it does have oil reserves. He's also going to take over France because he loves art. And what is the art capital of the world? France. He wanted to create the greatest museum in the history of art museums in Germany, and he needed to steal Jewish art from France. He's also going to conquer Denmark. Okay, and he's also going to conquer Norway. All right. So, the countries we have left are neutral countries. Of course, Switzerland. Because Switzerland is always neutral, both positive and negative. Portugal and Spain are going to stay out of it because they have their own economic woes at this point. Spain is in the middle of a civil war with Franco coming into power and fascism and all that stuff. Ireland is going to stay out of it because they're in a civil war between Catholics and Protestants. Yes, they're still fighting that problem over there. It's going to go until the 90s. Sweden is going to stay out of it because they're Swedish. I don't really know. Yes. Yeah, go. That's why I told you. Why didn't you go before? Okay, you tell him that I told you. Yes?
Okay.
Oh, my. Why didn't she leave?
She just loved you so much.
Ugh. But I don't want Mr. Gibbons to think I didn't. Turkey is going to stay out of it because they're a newly formed democracy, and damn it, the last war literally kicked out the Ottomans, and they thought, probably not a good idea. Saudi Arabia doesn't get involved because Saudi Arabia just found oil, and they're like, God damn, look at us. All right, there you go. There are your teams. So looking at this map, as you're coloring in the water, who should have won the war? The Axis. The Germans definitely should have won. But it is who gives the Allies the victory? USA. USA. It is because we have the resources and the manpower. And keep in mind, we were never directly attacked on mainland. We were attacked, of course, Pearl Harbor. But Pearl Harbor is not the mainland, and that is not our industrial heartbeat. Okay? So all of our factories are going to be in full production. We are going to go into emergency mode, and the government's going to take control over factories in order to streamline production of necessary war materials. Just like what happened during the pandemic when factories that weren't producing vaccines and medication and PPE were converted into factories that could make those products. That is what's going to happen. So we're going to turn car manufacturing into tanks. That's the quintessential one.
How is Switzerland able to stay out of all these conflicts?
Who?
Switzerland, how are they able to just stay out of it?
They just purposely don't pick a team, and like that's kind of their thing. So like no one expects them to pick a team. Does that make sense? The problem is that Hitler is going to get really, really mad at Switzerland and almost invade them. Because they're always neutral, they don't get invaded. So that's kind of the reason why they do it. Because the funny thing is they are known for their military, but like not known for their military. The Swiss Guard is who protects the Pope. And the reason why the Swiss Guard is who protect the Pope is because when they made this appointment in like 900, the Swiss were the best military, which is kind of funny. Anyway, it's just kind of their thing. All right, flip it. Let's go. Is there anything I do that you maybe enjoy?
I mean, I like arguing with you.
I actually do believe that is a true statement. I believe that. All right, we're going to zoom in on what will be Europe. Okay, here we go. So you're just going to put, and we'll label it in a second. We're going to put a star right here. Does anyone know what this is? Oh, let me tell you what we're labeling. Major battles. World War II. This is Normandy beaches in France, and this is where the largest land, air, and sea attack in the history of the world will be coordinated by, does anyone know who does it? Who is it, Izzy? Eisenhower. That's how Eisenhower rises to fame, and he will eventually become a U.S. president off this fame of organizing the largest land, air, and sea attack. This is the biggest conflict of the war. It is not the largest death count of the war, but it is the largest direct conflict death count. Keep in mind, D-Day is going to have the most soldiers killed. However, Leningrad and Stalingrad are going to have bigger death counts because we're counting civilians. Okay, the second one that I'm doing over here is called the Battle of the Bulge. That is going to be Hitler's last stand against the United States. Who's going to win? The United States, and that'll be Hitler's last stand, and he will be officially defeated. This is Kaiserk, which we're going to write here in a second, but Kaiserk is going to be the last stand of Hitler against the Soviet Union. Right here, what I just marked is Stalingrad, which is going to be the deadliest conflict in all of Russia. And then we have Leningrad, which is way over here. Leningrad is going to be the second deadliest conflict in the war when you start equating citizens into the death count. Over here did you tell him you were delayed because of you?
It wasn't a big deal.
Okay.
He just had to give me bus passes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I just didn't want him to think I was holding you back.
I
Okay.
told him.
Okay. I just don't want him to hate me. He doesn't know me. I want him to know me and then hate me. He is. He's so sweet, and that's why I don't want him to hate me. Yeah. Oh, sorry. And then this is Armenian, which is a huge conflict. Hitler will then control North Africa for quite some time. All right. So let's label them. This is D-Day over here. And this is Normandy. Okay, that's it. Over here is Leningrad. This is Stalingrad. This is Kursk, which is the final point. Now, and this is the Battle of the Bulge. As soon as the United States gets to the Battle of the Bulge, it's like a 3-week conflict, and that's Hitler's last stand. It's a race to get to Munich. And Kursk is the last big battle the Soviets have as they are pushing through, and it's a race to Munich to see who gets to control the end of the war. Because whoever gets there first gets to call the shots, correct? So, it is a huge problem because the Russians have no trust in the West. Because we are going to create, we, as in the Allies, are going to have 3 major failings against ALAMEIN is what that battle is. And that's control over North Africa, specifically Egypt, which is the Suez Canal. And then we have ANZIO, which is when Mussolini's empire collapses. Okay, we're also going to draw a box around this territory. And this is what we are going to call the European theater. World War II has two theaters, the European and the Pacific. Okay. Okay, so how about you color in the landmass? Ignore the islands over here in Asia while I tell you a couple things about the European conflict. Do that now. So you can color in your landmass and your water. Do not color anything from China over, because I'm going to label a bunch of things there.
So just in the box.
Sure, just in the box, and you can do Africa because not much is happening there. So, ladies and gentlemen, the United States and the Allied powers are going to commit 3 major crimes to what the Soviet Union feels that cannot be fixed. Now, keep in mind, did Russia want to join with the Allies at the beginning of the war? No. The only reason the Soviets come to England, France, and the United States is why? Hitler invaded him. He doesn't trust the West because he feels that Russia got screwed out of the Treaty of Versailles. So he already doesn't trust the West. And then the West is going to do 3 shady things to him. The first thing is that when the United States does get into the war in 1940 after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Stalin is begging for help because Hitler has already invaded. They're already losing millions of people. The death counts are insane. And they're like, you have to help us, help alleviate the weight of the Soviet Union. And England, France, the United States all agree to not go, but they're like, why don't we go to Africa first and use that as a staging ground to get into Europe? So instead of going directly to help the Soviet Union, everyone heads to Africa. So the first invasion into the European theater for America is to take back North Africa. The reason why they go after North Africa is they need the Suez Canal open so they can be sending oil and other necessary goods back to France and England to keep their war efforts going. Once the Allies have control over North Africa, then they launch their attack into the European continent via Italy. They start in Italy because it's the weakest point, because who is in charge of Italy? Mussolini. Mussolini is really good at talking shit, but he can't back it up. Hitler is going to save his butt 3 times, and after the 3rd time, he's like, dude, I'm over it. You either are going to live or you're going to die. Guess what happens to Mussolini? He dies because he's a hot mess. He dies in drag, which is pretty amazing, because he was trying to smuggle himself out of Italy. So, after Africa, we invade Italy. Guess who needs a lot of help still? Russia. Guess who's not getting any direct help? Russia. So he feels used and abused for the 2nd time. No one is coming to his aid, yet he needs it, and his men are dying in higher numbers than anywhere else. The 3rd major fraction. Now, these are important because the World War II directly causes the Cold War, ladies and gentlemen. The hostilities that are created in World War II is what directly caused the Cold War. The 3rd final betrayal of Stalin, as Stalin feels it, is the fact that FDR is going to Truman announces. So FDR dies about 4 months before the war in Europe ends. Truman takes over. Truman was not kept up on the actual war, and he had no idea that we actually had the technology for the atomic bomb. That was news to him. 3 days before we drop the atomic bomb on Japan, we are going to tell Stalin we had this technology. Churchill knew from the very beginning we were working on this technology. We just never told Stalin. Stalin was absolutely livid and absolutely disgusted by the fact that we had this technology. Why? It's super deadly, of course, and who has been dying in crazy high numbers? What would have helped save Russian lives? The atomic bomb helping to end Hitler's plight against the Russians. So he is absolutely livid about the discovery of the atomic bomb. And that is the final break, ladies and gentlemen. And that is going to be a huge convention that we're going to discuss here. All right, so that is the European theater. There are two theaters, the European and the Pacific. So, in the Pacific, we have Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You should know these names because those are the two locations where we dropped atomic bombs. Truman is going to make the decision to drop atomic bombs on Japan to save American lives. That's what he says. Now, the Japanese were not going to quit the war. The war against Japan is going to continue 2 years after Hitler is dead. And the war in Europe concedes. So this is going to be going on. Do Americans have a lot of patience? No. So the fact that this war is going on longer than the European war means people are really upset that this is still happening. So, the biggest thing you need to know about the Pacific is that the Chinese were not giving up. They were kicking our butts for a very long time, and then there's going to be a major turning point, which is kind of funny because the turning point is the Battle of Midway. Guadalcanal, Guadacanal. Guadalcanal. If you know anything about the about the Pacific theater, you know Guadalcanal is a place you don't want to be. All right, so let's label these. So this is Hiroshima. This is Nagasaki. Iwo Jima, which you shouldn't have heard of that name before. Midway Island. And this is Pearl Harbor, which is, of course, where? Hawaii, yes. Okay, you can finish coloring in your map. Oh, I want to label Australia down here. Okay, you can finish coloring in your map. So a perfect example of why the Chinese would not quit is the actual atomic bomb. So Truman comes into office, and as soon as he's sworn in, he's told that we have the capabilities to drop an atomic bomb. He's going to wait almost 2.5 years to do it, and it's because of the Japanese refusal to quit, which is comes to a perfect summation in what will become the two bombings. Now, after there was an analysis done that if we actually went in and conquered Japan with American troops, it was going to cost 1 million American lives to take the island because they would not surrender. So Truman makes the decision to drop the bomb on Hiroshima in order to get a quicker end of the war and save American lives. So we drop the bomb on Hiroshima. Japan refuses to surrender. We just killed over 100,000 people in 4 seconds. That does not include all of the people who are going to die because of the side effects. These are people who are literally liquidated and burned away into less than molecules. Now, they refused to surrender after we just liquefied and then incinerated 100,000 people because they didn't think we had 2 of them. If that doesn't tell you what the Japanese believed and was willing to do, I don't know what else does. With that being said, we're going to drop the second bomb on Nagasaki. Within 2 hours of dropping the bomb on Nagasaki, the Japanese surrendered. The funny thing is, we didn't have a third one, but we did have a second one. All right, we need to draw a box for our Pacific Theater. All right, this is your Pacific Theater. Now, a couple things. I will tell you a personal story. So my grandfather fought in World War II. He fought in the Pacific Theater. And when I was growing up, when I was young. And I was really disappointed that he wasn't killing Nazis and doing cool things in the European theater, but thought it was a disappointment he was in the Pacific theater. On a personal note, my grandfather was a piece of shit. He beat the hell out of my Nana, put her in the hospital 3 times, and beat the hell out of his 3 sons because he was a fall-down drunk. My Nana was the first divorced woman in Walpole, Massachusetts. And my dad was the only person he knew that had divorced parents at this time. With that being said, the reason why my grandfather was a fall-down drunk and an abusive piece of crap is because he was a prisoner of war on Guadalcanal, which is one of the worst places in the world to be. Now, when we think today in 2022 about the U.S. Marine Corps, we think of them as a bunch of like badasses, right? Like they can do anything. They get this reputation from World War II. The Marines earned that reputation from what they were doing in World War II in the islands. In the islands, the Japanese have been there for 30, 40 years. So they built essentially booby traps and hidden tunnels all throughout the island. So what would happen is in these jungles that these American boys have never seen is that the Japanese soldiers would disappear from one spot and pop up somewhere else in the middle of the dark and essentially haunt your dreams and show up out of nowhere and sneak around. There's a really amazing HBO series called Band of Brothers. You should totally watch it. You should ask your family what theater did they participate in? Are they from the European? Did your great-grandfather fight in the European theater and the Pacific theater? If they are in the Pacific theater, you owe it to them to learn more about where they were and what they were doing. It's your family heritage. Like I said, my grandfather fought in the Pacific theater. I have a Japanese map that he took from a Japanese soldier, obviously dead, and a couple other keepsakes from the war that I could bring in. I have them. So keep that in mind. You need to figure out, did they fight in Europe or did they fight in the Pacific? Iwo Jima, you should know this. Have you heard of it? Yeah. Iwo Jima is that American symbol of the men lifting the flag on the top of a hill. Okay, it's a huge turning point in the war. On that day alone, the flag fell 7 times from the top of Iwo Jima on top of this mountain. And those boys are going to be sent around the United States, and that is the final push that will lead to the end of the war. That fundraising, which will lead to it. Also, the psychological component of it is pretty interesting. Midway is the turning point of the war, not because it's the midway point. Midway Island is the only island outside of Pearl Harbor in Japan that had a landing strip. It was the most important island because if you controlled Midway, you controlled the sky. Because keep in mind, they don't have that many aircraft carriers at this time. So the only way to get airplanes in the sky was you had to have a landing strip. They figure out how to do aircraft carriers during the war after we get bombed at Pearl Harbor with the Doolittle raids. That's when we first have our first aircraft carriers. So Battle of Midway is a huge. Most of our American Marines are going to die at the Battle of Midway because they're dying trying to take over this aircraft strip, which is a huge deal. Of course, Pearl Harbor, it's the largest collection of American deaths on American soil since the American Revolution. And then, of course, Guadalcanal is a prisoner camp. And then Coral Sea is a terrible bombing. Australia is fully in the war because they're fighting, of course, as a British colony as well as for their own independence. There you go. Haven't you seen the movies on this stuff? Watch the movies, guys, especially Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers, oh my God. You won't be able to sleep for a good amount of time. That shit is haunting. It is haunting. Ugh. It's really, really good. I think it's done by Spielberg. I think he did that for HBO. And then, of course, you've seen Saving Private Ryan, of course, right?
I didn't watch about war
The
movies?
first 15 minutes?
Oh, the first 15 are the worst.
The first 15 minutes is the Battle of D-Day. You should watch. Should I make a list of movies you should watch? I mean, you're sure as hell not going to be watching it this weekend.
We should watch it in class.
For me to watch? Sure. Write down.
Movie exchange? Ooh. Watch them all at the end of the year after we take the exam.
Oh, yeah. We're only watching movies after the exam. We're not doing shit after this exam. Yes, I will come up with a nice little movie list for you, and I'll try to find out where they are on platforms. Like if you haven't seen Saving Private Ryan, you need to watch it. If you want my favorite war movie, it's with Jude Law. My heart is a flutter already. Can't think of the name, which is why I'm coming over here. It's about Stalingrad and the atrocities committed, and it's so jarring because they're like literally killing everybody. Have you seen Schindler's List?
No.
Have you watched The Imitation Game?
No.
Which is about beating the codes? Flags of Our Fathers, which is about Iwo Jima?
Miss, but they usually put all this on my list. I actually do I mean, like, I don't like them, but you know what I mean. Yeah, my dad's religion, so my grandma's
Oh, my favorite war movie from World War II is Enemy at the Gate. Oh my god, it's amazing. It's my favorite. And it's horrifying. It's about Vasily Zaitsev, who is the greatest sharpshooter in the history of the world. It's amazing. How much time do I have?
like 4 minutes.
4.